I always believed a 16th birthday was sacred ground, a truce line no family drama dared cross. That changed the moment my mother set down her iced tea, looked me dead in the eye, and announced she would not be attending. She told me my daughter did not deserve a celebration, not after what she supposedly did to her cousin. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was the sound of a war beginning right at our breakfast table. The invitations were cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, heavy enough to feel expensive but simple enough to avoid looking desperate. I sat at the kitchen island, running my thumb over the raised edge of my daughter's name. Tessa, 16. It felt like a finish line we were breathless to cross, a marker of survival in a year that had been filled with accelerated math classes, driving lessons that left my knuckles white, and the general, low-grade anxiety of raising a teenager in Briar Glen. Briar Glen was the kind of Illinois suburb where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the gossip moved faster than the fiber-optic internet. It was a place where mothers wore yoga pants that cost more than my first car, and where a birthday party was never just a party. It was a statement of social standing. I was 33 years old, a mother who worked 40 hours a week managing logistics for a mid-sized shipping firm, and I was tired. My husband, David, was upstairs fixing a leak in the master bathroom, and the rhythmic clanging of his wrench was the only thing keeping me grounded. I had spent 3 weeks negotiating with the venue, a converted barn on the edge of town that managed to be rustic chic rather than dusty. I had limited the guest list to Tessa's 20 closest friends, plus a mandatory family hour beforehand. That family hour was my olive branch. My relationship with my mother, Ruth, had always been a series of cold fronts and high-pressure systems. She demanded a specific kind of devotion, the kind that required total submission to her narrative of how a family should look. I had never quite fit that mold. I was too practical, too willing to wear jeans to Sunday dinner, too quick to defend my choices. But for Tessa's 16th, I wanted peace. I wanted the 3 generations of Henderson women to stand together for a photograph that would look convincing on a mantle. I stacked the envelopes, satisfied. The plan was solid. The venue was booked for 2 o'clock on Saturday. The family would arrive at 1 o'clock for appetizers and photos. It was efficient. It was manageable. I should have known that efficiency is no defense against family history. The following Sunday, we gathered at my mother's house for brunch. This was a non-negotiable ritual. Her house was a museum of beige carpet and antique dust, smelling perpetually of lemon polish and judgment. My older sister, Valerie, was already there when we arrived, sitting at the mahogany dining table with a posture that suggested she was bracing for an impact, or perhaps posing for a portrait. Valerie was 5 years older than me and had perfected the art of suffering beautifully. She was the mother of Marin, Tessa's cousin and former best friend. The 2 girls had been inseparable since diapers, a tangle of limbs and shared secrets. Until about 4 months ago, the drift had been subtle at first. Fewer sleepovers, unanswered texts, and then absolute. When I asked Tessa about it, she shrugged it off with the vague, maddening stoicism of a teenager. We drifted. She had said, "It happens." I looked around the table. David was making polite conversation with my father, who was mostly deaf to the undercurrents of emotional violence in the room. Tessa was absent, thank goodness, having claimed a study session for a history exam. My mother emerged from the kitchen carrying a quiche. She set it down with a sharp clatter of ceramic against wood. She did not smile. She took her seat at the head of the table, smoothed her napkin over her lap, and looked directly at me. "I have received the invitation. Madeline," she said. Her voice was level, calibrated to carry across the room without shouting. I smiled, though my stomach gave a preemptive lurch. "I hope you like the venue." "Mom, it is the one near the old mill. I will not be attending," she said. The room went still. Even the clinking of David's fork against his plate stopped instantly. I looked at Valerie, hoping for an explanation. But she was studying the rim of her juice glass with intense fascination. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice light, trying to treat it as a scheduling conflict. "Do you have a bridge tournament?" We can shift the time by 30 minutes if— It is not a scheduling conflict, Ruth interrupted. She picked up her iced tea, the condensation cold against her fingers. Your daughter does not deserve a sweet 16, not after what she did to your niece, not after what she did to Marin. The air left the room. It felt as though a window had been blown out, sucking all the oxygen into the yard. I looked at David, whose jaw was set tight, and then back to my mother. What are you talking about? I asked. Ruth took a sip of her tea, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim. It was a look I knew well. It was the look she gave when I came home with a B on a report card, or when I wore a dress she deemed unflattering. It was a look that said I had failed in a way that reflected poorly on her. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Ruth said, or you would. If you paid any attention to what goes on in your own house, Tessa has ruined Marin's life. She has humiliated her, and I will not stand in a room and celebrate a girl who could be so cruel. I turned to Valerie. My sister finally looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She looked devastated, a perfect picture of maternal grief. Val, I said, what is she saying? What happened? Valerie let out a shaky breath. She reached for a tissue from her purse and dabbed at the corner of her eye. I didn't want to bring it up, she said, her voice trembling. I told Mom to just let it go. We are trying to move past it, but seeing that invitation, it was too much. Specifics, I said. My voice was harder now. The shock was receding, replaced by the hot prickle of defensive anger. I need specifics. You can't accuse my daughter of ruining a life and then speak in riddles. What exactly did Tessa do? She humiliated her, Valerie whispered. She destroyed her reputation. Marin can't even walk into the studio without feeling like everyone is staring at her. It is lasting damage. Madeline, you can't just fix this with a party. What studio? I asked. The dance studio? I thought Marin quit because she wanted to focus on her grades. Valerie shook her head. A tragic, slow movement. That is what we told people, to protect her dignity. But she didn't quit. She was pushed out because of the environment Tessa created. Tessa doesn't even dance. I said, this makes no sense. Ruth slammed her hand on the table. It was a shocking breach of her usual icy decorum. Stop defending her, she snapped. This is exactly the problem. Madeline, you are so permissive. You let that girl run wild, and now she has hurt her family. I will not be there. And neither will Valerie. We are done pretending everything is fine. We finished the meal in silence. It was the longest 40 minutes of my life. We pushed eggs around our plates, the silence thick and suffocating. As soon as the check was irrelevant, because we were at home, though it felt like a transaction, David and I stood up. We are leaving, I said. My mother didn't look up from her plate. Do what you think is best, she said. You always do. The drive home was a blur of gray asphalt and green lawns. David gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. That was insanity, he said finally. I stared out the window. They believe it. David, they really believe she did something terrible. But what? He asked. What could Tessa possibly have done to ruin someone's life? She is 16. She worries about geometry and which filter to use on Instagram. She isn't a villain. I didn't answer. The terrifying thing about my family was that truth often mattered less than the story. If Ruth and Valerie had decided Tessa was the villain, the facts were just inconveniences to be swept away. When we got home, Tessa was in the kitchen making a sandwich. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt and pajama pants, her hair in a messy bun. She looked so young, so harmless. The disconnect between this girl, who was humming along to a song on her phone, and the social predator my mother had described was absolute. Hey, she said, looking up. How was the dungeon? Did Grandma critique your hair? I put my keys on the counter, trying to keep my hands steady. Tessa, we need to talk. She froze. The knife she was using to spread mayonnaise hovered in midair. She knew that tone. It was the tone of serious trouble. What? She asked. I studied for history. I promise. It is not about history, I said. I sat down on the bar stool opposite her. Grandma and Aunt Valerie are upset. They are claiming something happened between you and Marin. Something serious. Tessa's face went pale. She put the knife down slowly. They said you ruined Marin's life. I continued, watching her closely. They said you humiliated her at the studio. Tessa's mouth opened, then closed. A flush of red crept up her neck. That is a lie, she said. Her voice was quiet, trembling. Then tell me the truth. I said, what happened? We had a fight, Tessa said. She crossed her arms over her chest. A defensive shield. It was months ago, at the volunteer thing, the youth outreach event. I remembered. Tessa had volunteered to hand out flyers and organize donations for a local charity drive back in November. Marin had been there too. What was the fight about? I asked. It was stupid, Tessa said, her eyes filling with tears. We were arguing about the flyers. I told her she was being lazy. I said she always let other people do the work and then took the credit. And that was it, Tessa cried. She got mad and left. We haven't really talked since, but I didn't ruin her life. Mom, I didn't do anything to her at the dance studio. I don't even go there. She looked terrified. It wasn't the look of a guilty child caught in a lie. It was the look of a person realizing the ground was shifting beneath them. They said everyone knows. Tessa whispered, does everyone know? Do my friends know? No, I said firmly, though I had no idea if it was true. No one knows anything. It is just family drama. I am not a monster, she said, a tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. I swear. Mom, I am not a monster. I stood up and walked around the island, pulling her into a hug. She felt small in my arms, shaking. I know. I said into her hair, I believe you. But belief wasn't enough. I needed proof. Later that afternoon, while Tessa was in her room pretending to read, I sat on the back patio with my phone. I needed to bypass the gatekeepers. I needed to talk to Marin. Marin was a sweet girl, or at least she used to be. She was easily led, anxious to please, and deeply intimidated by her mother. If there was a misunderstanding, maybe Marin could clear it up before this poison spread any further. I typed out a text. I kept it neutral. I kept it safe. Hi, Marin. I hope you are doing okay. I know things are tense right now, but I wanted to check in. Tessa is really confused and upset. Can we talk? Just you and me? I just want to understand. I watched the screen. 1 minute passed, then 2, then the 3 little dots appeared. She was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Aunt Madeline. The message read, I can't talk. Please don't be mad at me. I typed back quickly. I am not mad. Honey, I promise. I just want to know what happened so we can fix it. The dots appeared again. They pulsed for a long time. Then a new message appeared. It isn't just about the fight. It is about what she said to the group. She knows what she did. I frowned. What group? What group? Marin? What did she say? I waited. The status changed to read. Then the dots appeared again. And then, right before my eyes, the previous message, the one about the group, vanished. Deleted. My stomach dropped. It was a visceral sensation, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. Marin had deleted the message. She was scrubbing the record. Marin? I typed. Nothing. No dots. No response. Just the silence of a digital wall going up. I went back inside. David was in the living room, watching golf with the volume turned low. He looked up as I entered. She deleted the message. I said, Who? Marin. I texted her. She said Tessa said something to a group, and then she deleted it. David sighed. He muted the television. Madeline. Maybe we should just cancel the family hour. I stared at him. What? Cancel the family hour? He repeated. Keep the party for her friends, but tell your mom and Valerie not to come. Tell them we are doing a kids-only thing. It saves face. It stops the fighting. And it admits guilt. I said. He rubbed his temples. It isn't a court of law. Madeline, it is a birthday party. If we cancel the family part, the tension goes away. We can deal with the accusations later. when emotions aren't so high. If I cancel, I said, my voice rising, I am telling Tessa that she has to hide. I am telling my mother that she wins. I am validating their story that my daughter is someone who needs to be kept away from decent people. David looked at me, his expression tired. You are going to make it a war, he said. You know that, right? If you push this, Ruth and Valerie will dig in. They always do. Let them dig. I said, I am not burying my daughter to keep their hands clean. The next day was Monday. I went to work, but my mind was in Briar Glen. I sat in my cubicle, moving shipping containers across an ocean on a spreadsheet, while my brain replayed the brunch over and over. The phrase scholarship drama came to me in the break room. I hadn't heard it from Valerie. I heard it from Sarah, a neighbor I ran into while getting coffee. Sarah was the type of woman who collected information like other people collected stamps. She cornered me by the sugar packets. So sorry to hear about Maren, she said, her voice pitched to a sympathetic whine. I froze, a packet of sweetener halfway to my cup. What about Maren? I asked, feigning ignorance. Oh, you know, Sarah said, leaning in. The scholarship drama. I heard she had a full ride to that summer intensive at Lark and Linden. And then, poof, gone. Such a shame. Kids can be so vicious these days. She looked at me pointedly. The implication hung in the air. Kids like yours. I didn't know Maren auditioned, I said, keeping my face blank. Oh, really? Sarah looked skeptical. I thought that was the whole reason. Well, never mind. None of my business. She breezed away, leaving me standing there with cold coffee and a racing heart. Lark and Linden. It was the premier dance conservatory in the county. Valerie had said Maren was humiliated at the studio, but Tessa had never set foot in Lark and Linden. She was a volleyball player. She had the coordination of a giraffe on ice when it came to dancing. How could Tessa ruin a scholarship opportunity at a studio she didn't attend? I went home early. I needed to see the timeline. I needed to see the logic. I sat at the dining table with my laptop. I pulled up the family calendar. I pulled up the text threads I had with Valerie. I pulled up the emails from the school. Valerie claimed the incident happened 4 months ago. That would be November. She claimed it destroyed Maren, that Maren had been spiraling ever since. I opened my phone and scrolled through my photos. I had thousands of them, an endless stream of moments captured and forgotten. I scrolled back to November, Thanksgiving. There was a photo from the youth outreach event. It was dated November 22nd, 3 weeks after the alleged fight, 3 weeks after the incident that supposedly ruined everything. I zoomed in. The photo was of the volunteers standing in front of a pile of canned goods. In the center were Tessa and Maren. They were standing shoulder to shoulder. Maren was laughing, her head thrown back. Tessa had her arm around Maren's waist. They looked happy. They looked close. If Tessa had done something monstrous in early November, why was Maren hugging her in late November? I looked at the date again. November 22nd. Valerie had said Maren withdrew from the world. She said Maren couldn't talk about it without shaking. I stared at the image of the smiling girl. Someone was lying. It wasn't just an exaggeration. It wasn't just a difference of perspective. My mother said, "You know what she did?" Valerie said, "Lasting damage." But the photo said something else entirely. The photo said that whatever happened, it didn't happen when they said it did, or it didn't happen how they said it did. I saved the photo to a separate folder on my laptop. I named the folder Evidence. David walked in the front door, looking exhausted. He saw me at the table, the laptop open, the grim set of my jaw. "What are you doing?" he asked. I turned the screen around so he could see the photo. "Look at the date," I said. He squinted at it. November 22nd. So? Valerie said the fight happened at the start of the donation drive. That was November 1st. She said Maren has been traumatized ever since. David looked at the girls smiling in the picture. He looked back at me. "They look fine," he said. "Exactly." I said, "They look fine." I closed the laptop. The sound was sharp in the quiet house. I am not canceling the party. David, I said, and I am not canceling the family hour. If they want to accuse my daughter, they can do it to my face. But first, I am going to find out why they are lying. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I had spent my life trying to keep the peace with Ruth and Valerie. I had swallowed their criticisms, their backhanded compliments, their demands for conformity. I had done it to keep the family together, but they had crossed the line. They had come for my child. And in Briar Glen, you don't come for a woman's child unless you are ready for a war you cannot win. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Lark and Linden Dance Conservatory. It was 5 o'clock. They would still be open. Lark and Linden. A voice answered. How may I direct your call? Hi, I said, pitching my voice to be bright, helpful, the voice of a confused mom. I am calling regarding the Summer Intensive Scholarship Program. I believe my niece, Maren Henderson, was an applicant, and there seems to be some confusion about her withdrawal. I just wanted to clarify some dates for her mother. There was a pause. 1 moment. Let me pull up the file. I waited. My heart was beating a rhythm against my ribs. Liar, liar, liar. I see here she withdrew. The receptionist said, But that is odd. What is odd? I asked. The withdrawal date, she said. It wasn't in November. When was it? I asked. January 15th, she said. And it wasn't a withdrawal by the student. It was a withdrawal by the parent. Citing family relocation. My blood ran cold. Valerie lived 3 streets away from me. She wasn't relocating. Thank you, I said. That is very helpful. I hung up. January. Maren was pulled out in January, 2 months after the alleged incident, and Valerie had lied to the studio about why. Why would Valerie pull Maren out of a prestigious program she loved, lie about the reason, and then blame it on Tessa months later? I looked out the window at the manicured lawn, the darkening sky. The streetlights were flickering on, casting long shadows down the pavement. Something was wrong, not just teenage drama wrong. Something was rotten in the foundation of this story. I stood up. I had a party to plan, and I had a mystery to solve. The Sweet 16 was going to happen. And by the time the cake was cut, I intended to know exactly who was holding the knife. The kitchen table had transformed into a war room. It was no longer the place where we ate David's Tuesday night tacos or where Tessa did her algebra homework. It was now ground zero for Operation Clarification, covered in a chaotic spread of printouts, highlighters, and 2 lukewarm mugs of coffee. I sat there late into Tuesday night, the house silent around me. David had gone to bed an hour ago, offering a supportive squeeze of my shoulder but clearly unable to stare at another calendar grid. But I could not sleep. The discrepancy I had found in the photograph, the smiling image of Tessa and Maren weeks after the alleged incident, was like a loose thread in a sweater. I had pulled it, and now I was unraveling the entire garment. I started building a master timeline on a yellow legal pad. I wrote down every date Valerie had mentioned during her dramatic recounting of events, and cross-referenced them with the digital footprint of our lives. Valerie claimed the incident happened on November 1st, at the kickoff for the Briar Glen Youth Outreach Winter Drive. She claimed Maren came home in tears, withdrew from her friends, and refused to go back to the dance studio because she was so humiliated by what Tessa had done. I pulled up the credit card statements. On November 10th, 9 days after the supposed trauma, there was a charge on Valerie's card, which she often asked me to co-sign for big family purchases, for 2 tickets to a touring ballet production in Chicago. Maren and Valerie had gone. I remembered seeing the photos on Facebook. Maren looked radiant in a velvet dress. On December 3rd, Maren's name appeared in the local paper's honor roll list, alongside a quote about how excited she was for the upcoming dance showcase. On December 12th, I had an email from Valerie. Maren is loving the new choreography. We need to buy costumes soon. I highlighted the email with a slash of neon yellow ink. If Maren was too humiliated to show her face in the studio in November, Why was her mother buying costumes in December? The narrative did not hold water. It wasn't just a leaky bucket. The bottom was missing entirely. Valerie was lying, not just exaggerating, but fabricating a reality that contradicted documented history. But why? People lie to protect themselves, or to gain something. What did Valerie gain by painting my daughter as a bully and her own daughter as a victim? Months after the fact? Wednesday morning, I decided to go to the source of the alleged professional fallout. I waited until 10 o'clock in the morning to call Lark and Linden Youth Dance Conservatory. I wanted to make sure the morning rush of drop-offs was over and the front desk would be quiet. I took a breath, put on my most professional, non-threatening voice, and dialed. Lark and Linden. "This is Sarah," a chirpy voice answered. "Hi, Sarah," I said. "This is Madeline Henderson. I am calling regarding some administrative details for the Henderson family file. I am helping my sister, Valerie, organize some paperwork for tax season, and we seem to have a gap in the records regarding Marin's tuition." "Oh, sure," Sarah said. "Let me just pull that up. Marin Henderson?" "Yes," I said. "I see here that she isn't currently enrolled, but I'm trying to pinpoint the exact withdrawal date for reimbursement purposes. My sister seems to think it was back in November due to, well, she mentioned a personal conflict at the studio." I let the question hang there. Inviting correction. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Sarah said. "No, that doesn't look right. Marin was fully attended through the winter showcase in December. She didn't withdraw until mid-January." "January," I repeated, writing the word down on my notepad and underlining it twice. "And does the file note a reason?" Valerie mentioned she was very upset about an incident involving another student. "I just want to make sure we aren't liable for any disciplinary fees if that was the case. I was gambling. If there was a report about Tessa, this is where it would come up." Sarah hesitated. I could hear her scrolling. "No, Mrs. Henderson, there are no disciplinary notes here, and no mention of an incident. The withdrawal form is signed by Valerie Henderson. The reason listed is simply, let me see. Family decisions." "Family decisions," I echoed. "Yes," Sarah said. "It was actually quite abrupt. I remember because Marin was up for a solo in the spring recital. We were sad to see her go. It definitely wasn't an injury or a conduct issue, just a voluntary withdrawal." "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice tight. "You have been incredibly helpful." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Valerie had lied about the timeline. She had lied about the reason. She had told the family that Tessa had bullied Marin out of the studio in November, creating a hostile environment. But the studio records showed Marin dancing happily until January, then being yanked out by her mother without explanation. Whatever happened to cause the rift, it didn't happen in November, it happened in January. And it didn't happen at the dance studio. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't hear the car pull up. The first warning I had was the sound of the front door opening, in our family. Locking doors was considered an insult to intimacy, a habit I had never quite broken despite David's grumbling. "Madeline?" The voice drifted from the foyer, sharp and unmistakable. "Ruth?" I stiffened. I closed my laptop, though I didn't have time to hide the legal pad covered in notes. I stood up just as my mother walked into the kitchen. She was dressed immaculately, as always. A pressed navy blazer, white slacks, and a silk scarf tied with geometric precision. She carried a Tupperware container, the universal suburban Trojan horse. "I brought leftover lasagna," she said, setting it on the counter. "I know you hate cooking on Wednesdays." It was a peace offering wrapped in a critique. I didn't hate cooking on Wednesdays. I just worked late on Wednesdays. "Thanks, Mom," I said, leaning against the counter to block her view of my notes. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Ruth didn't smile. She surveyed the kitchen, her eyes lingering on a pile of unsorted mail before snapping to my face. "I am not here to fight, Madeline," she said. "I am here to help you save yourself from a great deal of embarrassment." I crossed my arms. "Is that so?" "Cancel the party," she said. She said it casually, as if suggesting I change my lipstick shade. Mom, we have talked about this. I said, I am not canceling Tessa's birthday. You need to, Ruth said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Valerie is beside herself. She has been trying to protect you. Really? But if you persist with this parade of celebration for Tessa, Valerie is going to stop protecting you. She is going to tell people the truth. I felt a spark of anger in my chest. What truth? The truth that Marin withdrew from dance in January, not November? The truth that they were taking photos together weeks after the alleged fight? Ruth's eyes narrowed. Don't be difficult. Madeline, you know what I mean? The messages, the cyberbullying. Valerie has screenshots. The word hung in the air. Screenshots. Have you seen them? I asked. Ruth blinked. What? Have you seen these screenshots? I asked, taking a step forward. Has Valerie actually shown you the messages where Tessa supposedly bullied Marin? Ruth hesitated. She adjusted her scarf. A nervous tic I hadn't seen in years. I don't need to see them to know they exist. Valerie was in tears describing them. She said they were vile. She said she couldn't bear to look at them more than once. So you haven't seen them? I said, I trust my daughter. Ruth snapped. I am your daughter too. I said quietly, do you trust me? Do you trust Tessa? She has been your granddaughter for 16 years. Have you ever known her to be cruel? People change, Ruth said, her voice turning icy. Teenagers keep secrets. Valerie has the proof. She is holding it back to save Tessa's reputation. But if you force her hand by hosting this party and acting like nothing is wrong, she will release them. She will show everyone what your daughter is really like. It was a threat, plain and simple. It was blackmail. Let her, I said. Ruth recoiled, as if I had slapped her. Excuse me? If Valerie has proof, tell her to bring it, I said, my voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I want to see it. In fact, I insist on seeing it. If Tessa did something that horrible, I want to know. But I am not going to cancel a birthday party based on a rumor you heard from your other daughter about evidence you have never laid eyes on. Ruth stared at me. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker behind her eyes. It was the first crack in her armor. She was realizing that I wasn't folding. I wasn't playing the role of the submissive younger daughter anymore. You are making a mistake, she said, picking up her purse. A terrible mistake. You are choosing a party over your family. No. Mom, I said, I am choosing my daughter over a lie. Ruth turned and walked out. She didn't slam the door. She closed it with a soft, final click that felt louder than a scream. I sank onto a kitchen stool. My legs suddenly weak. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me nauseous. They were doubling down. They were inventing evidence now. Screenshots that couldn't be seen because they were too painful. It was a classic manipulation tactic. But the world outside my kitchen didn't wait for my family drama to resolve. That Friday evening, there was a fundraiser at the high school, a casino night for the athletic boosters. Tessa played volleyball, so attendance was mandatory. I had debated skipping it, but hiding felt like an admission of guilt. I wore my favorite black dress and a layer of foundation thick enough to hide the dark circles under my eyes. David came with me, looking dapper in a blazer but wearing the grim expression of a man walking to the gallows. The school gym had been transformed with green felt tables and twinkling lights. It was loud, hot, and crowded with the parents of Briar Glen. Within 10 minutes, I felt the shift. Usually, the moms I knew would wave or stop to chat about carpools and college applications. Tonight, the air was different. I saw a group of women near the silent auction tables, women who were close friends with Valerie. They were huddled together, holding glasses of cheap Chardonnay. As we walked past, the conversation stopped. 4 pairs of eyes tracked me. I smiled. A reflex. Hi, Linda. Hi, Susan. Linda, a woman who had been to my house for book club, gave me a tight, pitying smile. Hi, Madeline. Brave of you to be here tonight. Brave? I asked, stopping. Why is it brave? Linda glanced at her friends, then back at me. Oh, just with everything going on. It must be hard. You know, raising girls is so tricky. We always hope we are raising kind girls, don't we? But sometimes, well, she trailed off, taking a sip of her wine. The implication was a physical blow. Raising kind girls, meaning you failed. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. My daughter is kind, I said, my voice stiff. Linda patted my arm. Of course. Honey, we all want to believe that. She turned back to her circle, effectively dismissing me. I walked away, my heart pounding. The whisper network was active. Valerie had been busy. She wasn't just telling family, she was poisoning the community. She was painting Tessa as a bully to anyone who would listen, and in the absence of a defense. The lie was becoming the truth. I needed an official reality check. I needed to know if this poison had seeped into the school administration. On Monday morning, I took an hour of personal time and sat in the office of Mrs. Gable, the high school guidance counselor. Mrs. Gable was a woman who radiated calm. She had seen everything from vaping rings to cheating scandals. She sat behind her desk, hands folded over a file. I wanted to check on Tessa's file. I said, specifically, I need to know if there have been any reports, any incidents of bullying, cyber harassment, or peer conflict. Mrs. Gable looked at me over her glasses. She opened the file. Madeline, I have Tessa's record right here. She said, I have an academic transcript that is stellar. I have notes from her volleyball coach praising her leadership. I have absolutely nothing regarding discipline, not a detention, not a referral, nothing involving Maren Henderson, I asked, or any other student? Nothing. Mrs. Gable said firmly, if there were accusations of bullying, especially the kind that would cause lasting damage as you mentioned on the phone, there would be a paper trail. We take that very seriously. We would have called you. We would have mediated. So, officially, she is in the clear? Officially, Mrs. Gable said, closing the folder. She is a model student. She leaned forward. Madeline, can I speak off the record? Please, I hear things. She said, I hear the parking lot talk. I know there are rumors circulating, but rumors are not records. This feels personal. It feels like a conflict that is happening in living rooms, not in hallways. The school is not involved because nothing happened at school. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. Thank you. That is what I needed to hear. It was a relief, but a terrifying one. If the school had no record, and the dance studio had no record, then the entire scandal was a hologram projected by Valerie. But a hologram can still destroy a reputation. I left the school with a renewed sense of urgency. I had to stop chasing Valerie's lies and start finding the truth. And the only person who held the key was the girl who was supposedly the victim. I sat in my car in the school parking lot and pulled out my phone. I was going to try one more time. I texted Maren. Maren, please, I know you are stuck in the middle. I am not mad. Tessa is not mad. We just want to understand. Can we meet? Just for 10 minutes? I can pick you up after school. We can sit in the car. No one has to know. I stared at the screen, willing her to answer. I watched a group of students walk by, laughing, backpacks slung over one shoulder. They looked so carefree. I wondered if Maren felt the weight of this lie every time she walked into a room. The phone buzzed. Okay. The message read, Starbucks on Main, 4 o'clock. Please don't tell my mom. My heart leaped. I promise. See you there. I spent the rest of the workday staring at the clock. At 3:45, I was parked at the Starbucks. I bought a vanilla bean frappuccino, Maren's favorite. I found a table in the back corner, away from the windows. I waited. At 4 o'clock, she wasn't there. At 4:10, I checked my phone. Nothing. At 4:15, a message appeared. I can't come. I typed back frantically. I am here. Maren, I have your drink. It is okay. Just come for 5 minutes. The response was immediate, as if she had it typed and ready. Mom needs me at home. Please stop asking me. It is making it worse. Just leave it alone. I stared at the words. It is making it worse. Worse for whom? For Maren? Or for the story Valerie was trying to maintain? I didn't reply. I couldn't force her. Coercion was their tactic, not mine. I threw the Frappuccino in the trash and walked out to my car, feeling the heavy defeat of a dead end. I drove home on autopilot. When I walked in, Tessa was at the kitchen table, her phone in her hand, looking troubled. "Mom?" she said. "Yeah. Honey?" I dropped my keys in the bowl. Listening to the clatter, I was looking through my old messages. She said, "Trying to find that fight I told you about. The one about the flyers." "And?" "I can't find the group chat." She said, "The volunteer circle chat." I frowned, walking over to her. "What do you mean you can't find it?" "It's gone." She said, "I'm gone. Look." She held up her phone. I squinted at the screen. It was a blank space where a group thread should be. "I think they removed me," she said. "When?" I asked. "I don't know." She said, "I haven't looked at it in months. After the drive ended in November, it was mostly just boring updates, but I wanted to see the date of the argument. And when I searched for the group name, it says, 'You are no longer a participant.'" I took the phone from her. "Who was the admin?" "Mrs. Albright." Tessa said, "The lady who runs the outreach center. And Aunt Valerie." Valerie was an admin. Of course she was. "Tessa, think carefully," I said. "You said you argued about the flyers. Was there anything else? Anything at all that happened in that chat before you stopped checking it?" Tessa chewed on her lip. "I mean, not really. Just the fight with Marin. Oh, and I asked Mrs. Albright a question once." "What question?" "It was dumb." Tessa said, "We raised like $2,000 for the food bank, right? We had that big thermometer poster. But then in the chat, Mrs. Albright posted a final tally graphic that said we raised $1,200. And?" I pressed. And I just replied and said, "Wait, didn't the thermometer say 2,000 on the last day? Where did the rest go?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "What did she say?" I asked. "She didn't." Tessa said, "She deleted my comment like 5 minutes later, and then she direct messaged me and said I must have misread the thermometer and that I shouldn't spread misinformation. She was kinda mean about it, so I just shut up." My hands were shaking as I handed the phone back to Tessa. "You asked where the money went." I said softly. "Yeah," Tessa said, "but I probably just saw it wrong. Math isn't my thing, you know?" I looked at my daughter. She was innocent. She genuinely thought she had made a mistake. But I knew better. I worked in logistics. I worked with numbers. Numbers don't just disappear. $800 doesn't just vanish between a thermometer poster and a final graphic. And suddenly, the pieces started to shift. The kaleidoscope turned, and the pattern changed completely. Valerie and Mrs. Albright were friends. They ran the outreach circle together. Tessa had publicly, or at least semi-publicly in a group chat, questioned a financial discrepancy. She had asked where the money went, and shortly after that, she was removed from the chat. The rumors started. Then, my sister decided my daughter was a monster who needed to be socially isolated. They weren't protecting Marin from a bully. They were silencing a witness. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about teenage drama. This wasn't about a sweet 16. This was about money. It was about adults covering their tracks and using a teenager's reputation as collateral damage. My suspicion about the scholarship drama, the dance studio, the vague accusations, it was all smoke. The fire was at the Briar Glen Youth Outreach Circle. I looked at Tessa, who was scrolling through TikTok, oblivious to the fact that she had accidentally stumbled onto a crime scene. "Tessa," I said, "I need you to do something for me." "Yeah? Do you have any screenshots of that thermometer? Or the chat?" "No," she said. "I told you. I didn't think it was a big deal." "Okay," I said. "It's okay." I turned away, my mind racing. I didn't have the chat. I didn't have the screenshots. But I had a lead. I walked into the living room and opened my laptop again. I wasn't looking at dance studios anymore. I typed Briar Glen Youth Outreach Circle 501c3 into the search bar. If they were a registered nonprofit, their financials had to be public. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my gut. Ruth had told me to cancel the party to avoid the truth, but she had no idea what the truth actually was. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I was done playing nice. I was going to follow the money. And if it led where I thought it led, humiliation was going to be the least of Valerie's problems. The suspicion that my family's drama was merely a smokescreen for financial fraud sat heavy in my stomach, like a stone swallowed whole. It changed the texture of the air in my house. It turned the silence from peaceful to predatory. If Valerie and Mrs. Albright had removed Tessa from the volunteer group to silence her about missing money, then this was not just about a Sweet 16, it was about a cover-up. I needed to confirm the instability of the ground I was standing on. On Wednesday morning, I closed the door to my office at the shipping firm. I told my assistant to hold my calls for 20 minutes. I sat at my desk, the hum of the ventilation system the only sound, and dialed the number for the Briar Glen Youth Outreach Circle. Mrs. Albright answered on the second ring. Her voice was bright, practiced, the voice of a woman who spent her days soliciting donations and organizing galas. Briar Glen Youth Outreach. "This is Cynthia." "Hi, Cynthia," I said, matching her tone with a forced pleasantness. "This is Madeline Henderson, Tessa's mom." The pause on the other end was instantaneous and icy. "Oh, hello, Madeline. I wanted to touch base regarding Tessa's involvement with the circle," I said. I was reviewing her extracurriculars for college prep, and I realized I never received any formal notification about her removal from the volunteer group chat. I wanted to understand the specific grounds for her dismissal. I heard the rustle of papers, or perhaps it was just Cynthia shifting in her chair. "Well, Madeline, it wasn't a formal dismissal, per se," she said, her voice tightening. "We just felt that the dynamic had become unproductive." "Unproductive how?" I asked. "Tessa was becoming disruptive," Cynthia said. "Disruptive is a broad word." "Cynthia," I said, keeping my voice level, "can you give me a specific example? Did she miss a shift? Was she rude to a donor? Did she fail to complete a task? She was creating a negative atmosphere," Cynthia said, her tone becoming defensive, questioning leadership decisions, stirring up drama among the other girls. "We rely on a spirit of cooperation, Madeline." Tessa seemed more interested in challenging the process. "Challenging the process," I repeated. "You mean when she asked about the thermometer total versus the final deposit?" The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear Cynthia's heart rate spike. "I don't know what you are referring to," she said, too quickly. That was a clerical misunderstanding. Tessa was confusing the girls with incorrect numbers. It was best for everyone that she step back. "So she was removed for asking a question about the accounting?" I asked. "She was removed for being difficult." Cynthia snapped, her facade cracking. "Look, Madeline, I have a meeting in 5 minutes. We wish Tessa the best. Please don't call here again regarding this matter." The line went dead. She hadn't denied the discrepancy. She had panicked. I set the phone down. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a hunter who has just caught a scent. I opened my browser. The Briar Glen Youth Outreach Circle was a registered nonprofit. That meant their financial summaries were public record, or at least, they produced an annual impact report to dazzle their donors. I found the PDF for the previous fiscal year on their website. It was glossy, filled with photos of smiling teenagers, including one of Marin, and pie charts showing how the money was used. I scrolled down to the donor acknowledgement list. It was a hierarchy of gratitude. Platinum, gold, silver. I scanned the gold tier, donations of $1,000 to $5,000. There, halfway down the list, was a familiar name. Miller Landscaping and Design. I knew Tom Miller. He had done the pavers for our patio 2 years ago. He was a salt-of-the-earth guy, careful with his money, who complained if gas prices went up by 10 cents. A donation of over $1,000 seemed generous for him, but not impossible. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled to Tom's contact in my personal address book. It was a risk, if I was wrong. I would look paranoid, but the image of that thermometer dropping by $800 wouldn't leave my head. I dialed. "Hey, Madeline." Tom answered. The sound of machinery in the background. "Need some mulch already?" "It is barely March." I laughed. A nervous, tinny sound. "No, Tom, actually, I had a weird question. I am looking at the Youth Outreach Annual Report. They have you listed as a gold tier donor." There was a pause. The machinery noise faded, as if he had stepped away or turned it off. "Gold tier?" he asked. "What is the buy-in for that?" "Anything over $1,000, I said. Tom let out a sharp, bark-like laugh. "1,000? Madeline, business has been good, but it hasn't been that good. I gave them $250 and a couple of bags of fertilizer for the community garden." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Maybe a tax write-off?" "I write my own checks." "Madeline," Tom said firmly, $250. If they have me down for $1,000, they are cooking the books or they made a hell of a typo." "Why?" "Nothing," I said, my mind racing. "Just double-checking the community support. Thanks." "Tom." I hung up. I stared at the PDF on my screen. Miller Landscaping and Design, gold tier. If they reported receiving over 1,000, but only took in 250, where did the difference come from? Or rather, why inflate the numbers? Then it hit me. It wasn't about inflating the intake, it was about balancing the ledger. If they claimed they received more than they did, they could justify expenses that didn't exist, or conversely, if they were moving money around. They needed to pad the donor list to make the totals look impressive while siphoning off cash from elsewhere. It was messy, it was sloppy, and it was exactly the kind of thing a panicked suburban mom and a volunteer coordinator might cobble together if they had borrowed funds they couldn't repay. And Tessa had noticed. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from Valerie. "Madeline, we need to talk. Face to face. Meet me at the Roasted Bean in an hour. Please, for the sake of the family." I looked at the message. The timing was impeccable. I had just rattled Mrs. Albright's cage. Now Valerie was swooping in for damage control. I replied, "I will be there." The Roasted Bean was the neutral territory of Briar Glen. It smelled of dark roast coffee and expensive perfume. Valerie was sitting at a corner table, nursing a latte. She looked tired, her makeup applied with a heavy hand, lines of tension bracketing her mouth. When I sat down, she didn't offer a hug. She just pushed a scone toward me. "You look exhausted." "Madeline," she said, "I am not the one staying up late inventing stories." "Valerie," I said, ignoring the pastry. Valerie sighed. She clasped her hands on the table. The picture of weary benevolence. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here to offer you a way out." "A way out of what?" I asked. "The party you are trying to sabotage?" "A way out of the shame," she said softly. "Look, Mom is wreck. Marin is a wreck. This has gone on long enough. We are family. Madeline, we shouldn't be tearing each other apart over a teenage mistake." I waited. I knew the but was coming. "If Tessa apologizes," Valerie said, leaning forward, "a real apology, in writing, to Marin, and to the family. If she admits she was jealous and that she acted out, we can put this behind us. Marin is willing to forgive her. We can all come to the party. We can be a family again." I stared at my sister. It was a seductive offer. Peace, reunion, no more whispers at the grocery store. All it would cost was my daughter's integrity. "She wants Tessa to confess to something she didn't do." I said, "She did do it," Valerie hissed, keeping her voice low. "Madeline, stop being so blind. She bullied Marin. She harassed her online." "Show me," I said. Valerie blinked. "Show me the messages." I said, "You keep saying they exist. You keep saying they are vile. Show me one screenshot. Just one." Valerie looked away. She picked at the edge of her coffee cup. "I told you. They are too painful. Marin deleted them. She couldn't stand to look at them. So they are gone." I said, "Yes," Valerie said. "But the memory isn't—" "Then how do you know what they said?" I asked. "If they are deleted. And you couldn't bear to look at them. How do you know she was vile? I remember, Valerie snapped. I remember exactly what she wrote. She called Marin a spineless little leech. She said Marin didn't deserve her spot. It was distinct. Madeline, you don't forget words like that. I watched her closely. Spineless little leech. It was a very specific phrase. It sounded less like teenage slang and more like the kind of insult an adult would construct. So you can quote them verbatim, I said, but you can't produce the image. And you can't explain why Marin deleted them if they were the only proof she had to defend herself. Valerie's eyes narrowed. You are trying to lawyer your way out of this. This isn't a court. This is people's feelings. No, Valerie, I said, leaning in. This is about control. You don't want an apology because you are hurt. You want an apology because you need Tessa to be the villain. Because if she isn't the villain, then someone else is. Valerie froze. For a split second, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. She whispered, I think you do. I said, I think this has nothing to do with Marin and everything to do with why Tessa was removed from the volunteer circle after asking about the money. Valerie stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. People turned to look. You are delusional, she said, her voice shaking. You are desperate, and you are delusional. If you don't make Tessa apologize, you are going to regret it. I am trying to save you, Madeline, but you are determined to sink. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. She left the scone. I sat there for a moment, letting my heart rate settle. She hadn't denied the money accusation. She had run from it. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Janet, a mom whose daughter played volleyball with Tessa. Hey, Madeline. I felt weird not telling you this. Valerie just messaged me on Facebook. She is warning parents that there might be drama at Tessa's party and suggesting we keep our girls away for their own emotional safety. I told her we are still coming, but I thought you should know. I gripped the phone. Valerie wasn't just waiting for an apology. She was actively salting the earth. She was messaging families privately, framing it as protection, ensuring that even if the party happened, Tessa would be isolated. It was a scorched earth tactic. I drove straight to my mother's house. I didn't call first. I walked up the driveway, past the perfectly trimmed hedges, and rang the bell. Ruth answered, looking surprised. Madeline, you need to stop her, I said, stepping into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Stop who? Ruth asked, closing the door. Valerie, I said, she is messaging parents. She is trying to boycott Tessa's birthday. She is telling people my daughter is dangerous. Ruth sighed. She walked into the living room and sat on her floral sofa. She is just worried. Madeline, she thinks if people go, there will be a scene. She is trying to prevent embarrassment. Embarrassment for who? I demanded. For Marin? Or for you? For the family, Ruth cried, throwing her hands up. Do you have any idea how this looks? Cousins fighting? Rumors flying? It is untidy. Madeline, it is low class. So you don't care if it is true, I said. You just care if it is loud. I care about peace, Ruth said. I care about this family having a reputation for dignity. If Tessa would just accept responsibility. She is innocent, I yelled. It was the first time I had raised my voice at my mother since I was a teenager. The silence that followed was ringing. Ruth stared at me, her mouth a thin line. You have changed, Madeline. You used to be the sensible one, and you used to be the one who taught us not to lie, I said, my voice breaking. But here we are. You are backing a lie because it is easier than facing the fact that Valerie is manipulating you. Ruth looked away, smoothing her skirt. I am not being manipulated. I am being a grandmother. And right now, Marin needs me more, because she is weaker, I said, because she will do what you say. Tessa won't, and that is what you can't stand. I turned and walked out. I knew then that I had lost her. Ruth would never side with the truth if the truth was messy. She would go down with the ship as long as the ship was painted a tasteful color. I needed professional advice, not a therapist, a shark. I made an appointment with Alan Miller, no relation to the landscaper, a local attorney I had used for closing on our house. He wasn't a defamation specialist, but he knew the law. I sat in his office, surrounded by mahogany bookshelves, and laid it out. The rumors, the messages to other parents, the accusations of lasting damage without proof. "Can I sue?" I asked. "Can I get a cease and desist?" Alan took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Technically, yes," he said. "You could file for defamation. You could argue tortious interference if she is damaging Tessa's future prospects. But Madeline, look at me." I looked at him. "Litigation is public." He said, "It is slow, and it is expensive. By the time you get a court order telling your sister to shut up, the party will be over. Tessa will have graduated, and the town will have dissected every inch of your lives. A lawsuit doesn't stop a whisper campaign. It usually amplifies it. So I can do nothing?" I asked, feeling helpless. "You can fight back with facts," he said. "Rumors die when they hit hard evidence. But legal threats? In a family dispute? That is just gasoline on a fire. If you want to clear Tessa's name, you need proof that exonerates her, not a judge's signature." I left his office feeling heavier than when I arrived. He was right. The law was a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I went home and went back to the digital trail. I needed to understand the mechanics of Valerie's information. She claimed to know what was in the deleted chat. She claimed to know about the scholarship. I searched my own email inbox for Marin and scholarship. I found an email from 6 months ago. It was from Valerie. Subject: FWD. Lark and Lyndon Summer. Intensive acceptance. Look at this. So proud of our girl. I opened the email. It was a forwarded message from the dance studio to Marin's email address, confirming her acceptance into the program, but I looked closer at the header. From Marin Henderson, Marin, H, dance@gmail.com, to Valerie Henderson, Valerie, h@gmail.com. Sent Tuesday, August 12th, 10:15 a.m. And then, underneath that, another line, auto-forward set, to Valerie, h@gmail.com. I froze. Valerie hadn't just received a forward from Marin. The email settings indicated an auto-forward rule. Valerie was receiving a copy of every single email that came into Marin's inbox. If she had access to Marin's email, she likely had access to her cloud backups, her messages, her social media. Valerie wasn't just a protective mom, she was a surveillance state. This meant Valerie could curate the evidence. She could delete emails she didn't like. She could crop screenshots. She could reply to messages pretending to be Marin. The deleted messages that Valerie knew by heart? Maybe they were never deleted. Maybe they were drafted by Valerie herself. I heard the front door open. Tessa came in, dropping her backpack on the floor. She looked drained. "Mom?" she said. I looked up from the laptop. "Yeah?" I remembered something. She said. She walked into the kitchen and sat down. "About the fight?" I asked. "Yeah." She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. "You asked if I ever said anything mean." "And?" "I did," she said quietly. My heart stopped. "What did you say?" "It was when we were arguing about the flyers." She said, "Marin was complaining that her feet hurt and that she wanted to go home, and I snapped." "What did you say?" "Tessa?" "I told her she was spoiled." Tessa said. I said, "You are so spoiled. Marin, you are always protected. You think you can just quit when things get hard, because your mom will fix it." I let out a breath. "That was it?" "Yeah," Tessa said. "But I said it really mean," and she cried. "Tessa," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Calling someone spoiled is not bullying. It is a fight. It is normal. But Aunt Valerie says I humiliated her." Tessa said. I squeezed her hand. "Aunt Valerie is taking a kernel of truth, that you called her protected, and blowing it up into a mushroom cloud. She is using your guilt against you." Tessa looked up, her eyes wide. "Why?" Because you were right. I said, "What do you mean?" "You said she is always protected. You said her mom fixes everything. And that is exactly what is happening now. Valerie is trying to fix something broken, and she is using you as the glue." I stood up. The pieces were all there. The missing money, the surveillance, the spoiled comment that struck too close to home. I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need a judge. I needed to get to Marin. Not through a text, not through a coffee date. I needed to get Marin alone, away from the digital eye of her mother. And I needed to show her that the only way to break free from the cage Valerie had built was to open the door herself. The party was in 3 days, and I had a plan. But first, I had to make sure my own house was secure. I looked at Tessa. "Do you trust me?" I asked. She nodded. "Then get ready," I said, "because we are going to finish this, and we aren't going to apologize for a damn thing." The email from Valerie regarding the auto-forwarding rule had been the smoking gun, but I still needed to disable the weapon itself before the party. I needed to corner them, but not in a place where they could scream, and not in a place where they could leave easily. I needed neutral ground with exits, but also witnesses. I chose the lobby lounge of the Hotel Intercontinental near the highway. It was quiet at 2 o'clock on a Thursday. Populated mostly by business travelers focused on their laptops and the ambient jazz that was designed to lower blood pressure. It was a place that demanded hushed tones and decorum. My mother's 2 favorite things. I sent the text on Wednesday night. "Meet me at the Intercontinental lobby. 2 o'clock. We need to settle the terms for Saturday." They arrived together. Of course, Ruth and Valerie were a united front, dressed in what I like to call their suburban armor. Ruth wore a stiff tweed jacket that looked bulletproof, and Valerie was in a cashmere wrap that suggested fragile elegance. They sat on the velvet sofa opposite my armchair, placing their designer handbags on the floor with synchronized precision. I ordered an iced tea. They ordered nothing. "I am glad you agreed to meet," Valerie said, smoothing her wrap. "I hope this means you have come to your senses about the apology." I didn't answer immediately. I took a sip of my tea, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I watched Valerie's eyes dart around the room, checking to see if anyone important was watching. "We are not here to discuss an apology," I said, setting the glass down. "We are here to discuss the narrative." Ruth stiffened. "The narrative?" "Madeline, this is not a book club. This is your niece's life. It is a story," I said, "and it is a story with a lot of plot holes. So I want to give you one chance, right now, to tell me the version you plan to repeat on Saturday. Because if it doesn't match the facts I have found, we are going to have a problem." Valerie let out a sharp, derisive breath. "The facts are simple. Tessa bullied Marin. She humiliated her publicly. She ruined her chance." I leaned forward. "Ruined her chance at what?" "At the summer intensive," Valerie said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. "Marin had a spot at the Lark and Linden summer program. It is the most prestigious program in the state, and because of the toxic environment Tessa created, Marin had to give it up. She was too devastated to focus. She lost her spot." I looked at her. It was a good line. It painted Marin as the tragic artist and Tessa as the vandal. "That is interesting," I said calmly, "because I spoke to the studio on Monday." Valerie's face went rigid. "You did what?" "I spoke to the administration at Lark and Linden." I continued. "They were very helpful. They confirmed that Marin did withdraw. But they didn't say she lost her spot. They said she was withdrawn by a parent, by you." "Valerie, that is just paperwork," Valerie said quickly. "I had to withdraw her because she couldn't handle the stress Tessa caused." "And the date?" I asked. "You told the family the incident happened in November. You said Marin was humiliated then. But the studio records show she danced perfectly happily until mid-January. She performed in the winter showcase. She was attending classes 5 days a week. I watched a flush of red creep up Valerie's neck. She was holding it together." Valerie snapped. She was trying to be strong, but the trauma builds up. "Madeline, you don't understand how these things work, and the reason listed for withdrawal," I said, ignoring her outburst. It wasn't bullying. It wasn't medical. It was family decisions. And you told the receptionist you were relocating. Ruth turned to look at Valerie. You told them we were moving? Valerie waved her hand dismissively. I had to say something. Mom! I couldn't tell them my niece is a sociopath. I was protecting the family name. I didn't blink. So, to clarify, Tessa bullied Maren in November. Maren was fine until January. Then you pulled her out, lied to the studio about moving, and now, 3 months later, you are blaming Tessa for ruining her chance at a program you voluntarily removed her from. Valerie's mouth opened and closed. She looked like a fish on a dock. It wasn't just the studio, she said, pivoting hard. It was the private group chat. That was where the real damage happened. The things Tessa said in that chat. They were unforgivable. That is why Maren fell apart. Ah, the chat, I said. The one Maren deleted. Yes, Valerie said, looking relieved to be back on unverified ground. It is gone, but the pain isn't. If it was a private chat, I said, who else was in it? Valerie hesitated. It was just the girls, and a few others. Who? I asked. Name one other person. Valerie. If Tessa humiliated Maren publicly in a chat, there must be witnesses. Give me one name. Valerie glared at me. I am not dragging other children into this. You are dragging my child into this, I said, my voice hardening. You are assassinating her character based on evidence you cannot produce, regarding an event that doesn't fit the timeline. To explain a withdrawal, you initiated yourself. I leaned back. Here's what I think. I said, I think there is no chat. I think there is no bullying. I think Maren wanted to dance, and you pulled her out. And I think you needed a scapegoat to explain to Mom why her perfect granddaughter wasn't going to be a ballerina this summer. Ruth looked between us. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands were gripping her purse strap so tightly her knuckles were white. Valerie, Ruth said slowly, did you pull her out? Valerie turned on her mother. I did it for her. She was stressed. Mom, she was crying all the time. Because of Tessa? Ruth asked. Because of everything, Valerie cried. The pressure, the schoolwork, and yes, Tessa was part of it. She was unsupportive. Unsupportive, I repeated. That is a long way from monstrous. Valerie stood up. I am done with this. You are twisting everything to save your daughter, but you can't hide the truth forever. She grabbed her bag. Ruth didn't move. Are you coming? Mom? Valerie demanded. Ruth looked at me, then at Valerie. I will meet you at the car, she said. Valerie stormed out of the lobby, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. I sat with my mother in the silence she left behind. She is lying. Mom, I said softly. You can see that, right? Ruth looked at her hands. She is upset. Madeline, mothers do irrational things when they are upset. She is lying to destroy Tessa. I said, and you are letting her. Ruth stood up. She looked older than she had when she arrived. Her armor seemed a little less shiny. I just wanted a nice party, she said. That is all I ever want. A family that looks like a family. Then you should have taught us how to be one, I said, instead of teaching us how to pose for pictures. Ruth walked away without looking back. I left the hotel with a victory, but it felt hollow. I had exposed the timeline contradiction. But I still hadn't found the root. Why did Valerie pull Maren out in January? Why the sudden need to destroy Tessa now? The answer, I suspected, lay with the other witnesses Valerie refused to name. I went back to my car and pulled out the list of volunteers I had found on the Outreach website before they scrubbed Tessa's name. I recognized 2 names, Chloe and Liam. They were Tessa's age, theater kids who ran in adjacent circles. I messaged Chloe through Instagram. Hey Chloe, this is Mrs. Henderson, Tessa's mom. I am trying to clear up some confusion about why Tessa was removed from the outreach group. Did something happen in the chat back in November? I just want to make sure I handle it right. Teenagers are surprisingly responsive when you approach them with respect rather than accusation. Chloe replied within 10 minutes. Hi, Mrs. Henderson. Yeah, it was weird. No one really talks about it. Talks about what? I typed. The fight with Marin? It wasn't really a fight with Marin. Chloe wrote back. They argued. But that was after. The big thing was the post. The post? Yeah. Mrs. Albright asked us to write the caption for the Thanksgiving drive photo. She told us to write that we raised over $3,000. But Liam had the spreadsheet, and it only said like 1,800. Tessa asked why we should lie. I felt the cold confirmational click in my brain. And what happened? I asked. Mrs. Albright got super mad. Chloe said, she said it was projected revenue and that we didn't understand marketing. She made Liam change the spreadsheet. Tessa said it was sketchy. That was when she got kicked from the chat. And Marin? I asked. Marin was crying. Chloe wrote, she kept telling Tessa to just shut up and do what Mrs. Albright said. She said her mom would be so mad if the drive didn't look successful. That was when Tessa told Marin she was protected and spoiled, because Marin was okay with lying to keep her mom happy. I thanked Chloe and sat back in my seat. It was exactly what I had feared. The bullying was Tessa refusing to participate in fraud. The humiliation was Marin being caught between her moral compass and her mother's ambition. Valerie and Mrs. Albright were inflating the numbers. Why? To keep their status, to attract bigger sponsors, or perhaps to cover for money that had already been spent. If they claimed 3,000 but only deposited 1,800, they could claim the rest was overhead or pending, or they could simply use the inflated number to secure a matching grant from a bigger fish, like the corporate sponsors Valerie loved to brag about. If the discrepancy came out, the Youth Outreach Circle would lose its 501c3 status. The sponsors would flee. And Valerie, who built her entire social identity around being a philanthropic leader in Briar Glen, would be a pariah. She wasn't protecting Marin. She was protecting her own ego, and she was willing to brand my daughter a villain to discredit the only person who had asked, "Where is the money?" I drove home, my mind racing with the logistics of the Sweet 16. The party was in 48 hours. I found Ruth waiting in my driveway. She was standing by her car, looking at my front door as if she couldn't quite figure out how to open it. I pulled in and got out. "Mom?" She turned. Her face was pale. I didn't mean for it to blow up. She said, her voice was small, stripped of its usual command. "What?" I asked, walking closer. "Valerie." She said, I knew she was exaggerating. I knew Marin wasn't ruined. But Valerie was so frantic. She said if we didn't support her, she would look like a bad mother. She said Marin was out of control and she needed a reason to rein her in. "So you went along with it." I said, "You told me my daughter didn't deserve a birthday. I was trying to keep the peace," Ruth cried, her voice cracking. "If I sided with Valerie, I thought you would just fold. You usually fold. Madeline, you are the practical one. I thought you would cancel the party. Valerie would feel supported, and we could all move on." I stared at her. It was a confession, but it was also an accusation. "You thought I would sacrifice Tessa to make Valerie feel better?" I asked. "I thought you would keep your household in line," Ruth snapped, the old anger flaring up to cover her shame. "That is what a mother does. Madeline, she manages the image. She keeps the cracks from showing. But you had to dig. You had to ask questions. You have made this a disaster." I felt a profound, aching sadness. It wasn't hate. It was just the realization that my mother was incapable of loving anything that she couldn't control. "Love isn't about image, Mom," I said. "And it certainly isn't about obedience. It is about loyalty." Ruth said, "No." I said, "Loyalty to a lie is just conspiracy." I walked past her to the front door. "You are not uninvited." "Mom," I said, turning back, "but if you come on Saturday, you come as a grandmother, not as Valerie's enforcer. And if you say one word to Tessa about this, one single word, I will have you escorted out." Ruth stared at me, her mouth agape. "You wouldn't try me," I said. She got in her car and drove away. I went inside and locked the door. I had work to do. I called the venue manager. "I need to make a change to the security protocol." I said. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "I hope not," I said. "But I need a dedicated security person at the door. I will provide a guest list. No one not on that list gets in. And I need someone who can handle a potential family dispute." Discreetly. "I understand." He said. "We have a guy. Big Mike. He used to work at a club in the city. He's very polite, but he is immobile." "Perfect," I said. "Book him." Next, I texted the family group chat, the one that included David, Tessa, my dad, and my in-laws. I removed Ruth and Valerie from the thread before typing. Update on the party. We are scaling back the family hour. It will now be casual appetizers starting at 1:30. Friends arrive at 2. No speeches, no drama. We are here to celebrate Tessa. It was a boundary, a wall built to keep the floodwaters out. Friday passed in a blur of balloons, cake pickups, and anxiety. Tessa was quiet. She knew something was happening, but I had spared her the details of the financial fraud. She just knew that her aunt and grandmother were confused, and that we were handling it. I was in the kitchen Friday night, wiping down the counters for the 3rd time. When I saw headlights sweep across the front window, it was 10 o'clock, too late for a casual visitor. I looked out the peephole. A small figure was standing on the porch, huddled in a hoodie. I opened the door. Marin, she looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy. She was shivering, though the April air wasn't that cold. "Marin?" I said. "Honey, come in." She shook her head, taking a step back. "I can't. Mom thinks I'm sleeping." I snuck out. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me to keep the warmth in, or maybe to keep the house safe from the contagion of this night. "What is wrong?" I asked. She looked at me, her lower lip trembling. "If I tell you something, will you hate me?" "Oh. Marin," I said, my heart breaking for her. "I could never hate you." She hugged herself, digging her fingers into the sleeves of her sweatshirt. "Mom wrote the messages," she whispered. I froze. "Which messages?" "The ones she said I deleted." Marin said, "The ones she said Tessa sent. They never existed. Tessa never sent them. Mom took my phone one night. She changed Tessa's contact name to a fake number she made with an app. And she texted herself these horrible things, and then she took screenshots, and then she deleted them. I felt sick. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just interpretation. It was fabrication. Valerie had manufactured a digital assault. Why? I asked. Why would she do that? Because I wanted to quit dance. Marin sobbed. I wanted to quit in January. I hated it. The pressure was too much. I told her I couldn't do the summer program. She screamed at me. She said I was ungrateful. She said after all the money she spent. She took a gasping breath, and then she came up with the story. Marin said, she said if we told people Tessa bullied me, then it wouldn't look like I quit. It would look like I was a victim. She said everyone would feel sorry for me and she wouldn't look like a failure. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate. She made me say it. Aunt Madeline. She said if I didn't back her up, she would take my phone, my car, everything. She said I would be the girl who let her family down. She said I had to be loyal. I pulled Marin into a hug. She collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. It is okay, I said, stroking her hair. It is okay. You are brave for telling me. I am not brave. She wept. I am a coward. I let her hurt Tessa. You are a child. I said firmly, you are a child who was threatened by the person supposed to protect you. That is not your fault. I held her until the sobbing subsided to hiccups. You have to go home, I said gently, before she notices you are gone. Marin pulled back, wiping her eyes. What are you going to do? I am going to let Tessa have her birthday, I said, and then, I am going to fix this. Are you going to tell everyone? Marin asked, fear returning to her eyes. I looked at my niece. She was terrified of her mother. She was terrified of the truth. I am not going to let her hurt you. I said, I promise. But Marin, tomorrow, at the party, if she tries to start something, I won't let her, Marin said. Her voice was shaky, but there was a new steel in it. I won't let her lie anymore. She turned and ran back to her car. A shadow slipping back into the dark, I watched her go. Valerie had crossed the final line. She hadn't just lied about my daughter, she had abused her own. She had gaslit Marin into being an accomplice in her own trauma. I walked back inside. The house was quiet. I went to my bedroom and opened the safe in the closet. I took out the hard drive where I backed up our family photos. I wasn't looking for photos this time. I sat on the edge of the bed. I had the timeline. I had the motive, the money. I had the witness, Marin, and I had the method, the fake texts. Valerie was coming to the party tomorrow. She was coming to perform the role of the grieving mother. She was coming to destroy my daughter's day. But she didn't know that the stage had been reset. She didn't know that the spotlight was about to swing around. I wasn't just a practical mom from Briar Glen anymore. I was the architect of her downfall. I closed my eyes. Sleep fast. Valerie. I thought, because tomorrow, we wake up. The adrenaline from the previous night had not faded. It had crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. I sat at my kitchen island at 6 o'clock in the morning, watching the sun drag itself over the rooftops of Briar Glen. The house was silent, but my mind was loud with the echo of Marin's sobbing on my porch. I needed to formalize her confession. A tearful midnight admission was powerful, but in the daylight, under the pressure of her mother, Marin might recant. I needed a record, and I needed safety. I woke David up at 7. I told him everything. The midnight visit, the fake messages, the threats Valerie had used to silence her own daughter. David sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face, his expression shifting from sleepiness to a dark, quiet anger. We are going to get her, he said. We are going to save them. I corrected, both of them. I texted Marin, meet us at the library study room at 9. David will be there too. Just us. We need to write this down. The library was neutral ground. It was public, yet private enough in the reserved study rooms to speak freely. Marin arrived 5 minutes early. She looked like a ghost of the girl she used to be. Pale, wearing oversized sweatpants, her hair pulled back in a severe, unwashed bun. David stood up when she entered and offered her a chair. He didn't hug her. He simply said, "You are safe here." Marin. I sat across from her. I had a notebook, not a laptop. I wanted this to feel less like an interrogation and more like a safety plan. Tell us about the money. Marin, I said gently. Marin picked at her cuticles. She wouldn't meet my eyes. It started in November, she said, her voice barely a whisper. After the drive, Mrs. Albright posted the total, $3,000, but we all knew it wasn't $3,000. We counted the cash boxes. We saw the checks. It was barely $1,800. And Tessa noticed. I said, Tessa always notices, Marin said, a small, sad smile flickering on her face. She put it in the chat. She asked, "Hey, did we get a late donation? Because the spreadsheet says 1,800. I wrote down. November. Discrepancy questioned. And then what happened? David asked. Marin took a shaky breath. Mrs. Albright called my mom. I was in the kitchen. I heard Mom yelling. She was saying, "How could you let her see the spreadsheet? And we have to fix this." Fix it how? I asked. By making Tessa the problem. Marin said, Mom told me that Tessa was being divisive. She said Tessa was jealous that I was the volunteer captain, and she was trying to make the organization look bad to hurt me. Did you believe her? I asked. At first, no, Marin said. But then Mom kept saying it. Every day. She said, Tessa is trying to ruin your reputation. She is trying to get the studio to drop you. She made me feel like I was under attack. And the screenshots? I asked. You told me last night she faked them. Marin nodded. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. Her hands were trembling. She did fake some. She said, she used an app to make it look like Tessa was sending me hate speech, but she edited real ones. Show me. I said. Marin opened her photo gallery. She scrolled to a folder named Hidden. She handed the phone to me. I looked at the image. It was a screenshot of a text message from Tessa. You are such a coward. You are letting them steal. It looked damning. Coward. Steal. But then Marin swiped to the next image. It was the original message, recovered from her deleted folder. You are such a coward for not speaking up. You are letting them steal credit for work they didn't do and money we didn't raise. Marin, please, tell your mom to stop. Valerie had cropped it. She had cut off the second half of the sentence. She had turned a plea for integrity into a personal insult. She showed me the cropped version. Marin said, look at this. Look how she talks to you. She never showed me the full text. I only found the original later. When I restored my backup, and why didn't you say anything then? David asked gently. Because Mom told me if the truth came out about the money, the studio would pull my scholarship. Marin said, tears spilling over. She said the Miller family, the landscapers, they donate to the studio too. She said if they found out the outreach numbers were fake, they would pull funding from everything. She said I would lose dance. I would lose my friends. She said Tessa was trying to burn my future down. I felt a cold fury radiating from my chest. Valerie had weaponized Marin's dreams. She had held her daughter's future hostage to cover up her own fraud. Marin, I said, did you ever say Tessa ruined your life? No, Marin sobbed. Never. Mom wrote that in an email to Grandma. She read it to me and said, this is what you feel. Marin, say it. So I said it. I reached across the table and took the phone. Can you forward me something? I asked. The email where your mom asked for your passwords? Marin nodded. She took the phone back, tapped the screen a few times, and a moment later, my phone buzzed. I opened the email. It was dated November 10th. Subject, Digital Organization / Phone Sync Marin. I need your login for iCloud and your passcode. I am syncing our family calendars, and I want to make sure your storage is optimized for the dance videos. Do not change it back. I need to monitor the studio communications. It was the smoking gun. Valerie had demanded full control of Marin's communications 3 days before the rumor campaign began. She hadn't been optimizing storage. She had been scrubbing the evidence and planting the seeds of the lie. I looked at Marin. You are done, I said. You are done protecting her. What are you going to do? Marin asked, wiping her nose with her sleeve. I am going to ask a question. I said, a question they can't crop. I drove Marin home, dropping her a block away so Valerie wouldn't see my car. David went to his office to scan the notes we had taken. I went home to draft the letter that would detonate the foundation of my sister's life. I didn't contact Valerie. I didn't contact Ruth. I went straight to the top. I found the contact information for the board of directors of the Briar Glen Youth Outreach Circle. The chairman was a man named Arthur Sterling, a retired banker who took his fiduciary responsibilities very seriously. I sat at my computer and typed. I kept it professional. I kept it cold. Dear Mr. Sterling, I am writing to formally request a donor audit regarding the funds raised during the November Thanksgiving drive. As the parent of a former volunteer, Tessa Henderson, I recently came into possession of information regarding a discrepancy between the public donation total of $3,000 and the internal ledger total of $1,800. Specifically, I am requesting an audit trail for the gold tier donation attributed to Miller Landscaping and Design. The business owner has verbally confirmed a donation of $250. Yet the outreach materials reflect a donation in excess of $1,000. My daughter, Tessa, was removed from the volunteer group shortly after inquiring about this specific discrepancy. Given the current rumors circulating regarding her conduct, I believe it is in the best interest of all parties to clarify the financial reality so that we may separate personal conflict from professional misconduct. I look forward to your transparency. Sincerely, Madeline Henderson. I hit send. It wasn't an accusation. It was a request for clarification, but to a board member like Arthur Sterling, it would read like a subpoena. Discrepancy is a polite word for embezzlement. Audit is a polite word for investigation. I knew Valerie would hear about it. Mrs. Albright would call her the second Sterling called her. It took 3 hours. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID said, Valerie. I didn't answer. It rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text started. What did you do? You are insane. You are actually insane. Call me right now, or I swear to God. Madeline. I sat on my patio, drinking tea, watching the notifications stack up like cordwood. I wasn't going to talk to her, not yet. I wanted her to sit in the panic she had inflicted on my daughter for 4 months. At 2 o'clock, she showed up. I heard the tires screech in the driveway. I heard the car door slam. I stayed on the patio. The sliding glass door was locked. Valerie came around the side of the house. She was wearing sunglasses, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She looked frantic. She marched up to the edge of the patio. You vindictive little witch, she spat. Hello? Valerie, I said. You contacted the board? She screamed. Her voice cracked. She sounded unhinged. You contacted Arthur Sterling? Do you have any idea what you have done? I asked for an audit. I said calmly, if the numbers are right, you have nothing to worry about. It is not about the numbers, she yelled, waving her hands. It is about reputation. You are trying to destroy me. You are using a child's pain, Marin's pain, to punish me because you can't handle the fact that your daughter is a bully. I stood up. I walked to the edge of the patio. So there was nothing between us but thin air and the truth. Stop it, I said. Stop what? She demanded. Stop using Marin as a shield. I said, I know about the Miller donation. Valerie, I called Tom. He gave $250. You listed him for $1,000. Where did the other $750 come from? Or did it never exist? Did you just pad the numbers to get the matching grant from the Rotary Club? Valerie's face went white. She took a step back. You don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. And I know about the messages. I continued. Marin told me. She told me about the cropping. She told me about the app. She told me you threatened to pull her from dance if she didn't lie for you. Valerie laughed. A high, brittle sound. Marin is a confused teenager. She is traumatized. You manipulated her. No, I said. I listened to her. Something you haven't done in years. Valerie stared at me. The venom in her eyes was replaced by something else. Desperation. You have to retract the email, she said. Her voice dropped to a plea. Madeline, please, if Sterling looks into the books, it is messy. We moved some things around. It was for the program. We needed the matching funds to keep the studio contract. It wasn't for me. It is fraud. Valerie, I said, it is creative accounting, she cried. Everyone does it. And you are going to send your own sister to jail over a birthday party? I am not sending you to jail. I said, you sent yourself there when you decided to frame my 16-year-old daughter to cover your tracks. I turned to go back inside. If you don't fix this. Valerie screamed after me. I will ruin her. I swear. Madeline, I will release everything. You have nothing to release, I said over my shoulder. And now, everyone knows it. I went inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I expected silence after that. I expected Valerie to retreat and lawyer up, but in families like ours, silence is rare. Ruth arrived an hour later. She didn't scream. She didn't storm. She knocked on the door like a polite guest. I let her in. She walked into the living room and sat down, keeping her coat on. She looked tired. Valerie called me. She said, I assumed she would. I said, she says you are trying to get her fired from the charity board. Ruth said, she says you are making wild accusations about money. They aren't wild. Mom, I said, they are verified. Ruth sighed. She smoothed the fabric of her coat. Madeline, does it matter? I stared at her. Does it matter? Yes, Ruth said. Does it matter if the numbers were a little off? Valerie does so much good for this community. She organizes the drives. She runs the galas. So maybe she cut a corner. Does that justify blowing up the whole family? It justifies clearing Tessa's name, I said. But at what cost? Ruth asked. She looked at me with genuine pleading. People will talk. Madeline, if there is an investigation, it will be in the papers. Henderson family fraud. Is that what you want? I felt a surge of disbelief. Even now, facing the reality of theft and framing a child. My mother was worried about the headlines. People will talk, she repeated. They will whisper. I looked at my mother. I saw the fear that governed her life, the fear of being seen as imperfect. Mom, I said, my voice steady. People already are talking. They are calling my daughter a bully. They are calling your granddaughter a monster. You were fine with the talk when it was destroying Tessa. Why are you suddenly so worried about it now that it is exposing Valerie? Ruth flinched. That is different. Tessa is a child. She can bounce back. Valerie has a position in this town. Tessa is a child, I shouted. That is the point. You were willing to sacrifice a child to protect a grown woman's social standing. I am trying to protect the family, Ruth cried. No, I said, you are trying to protect the illusion, and I am done with it. Ruth stood up. She looked at me with a cold, tragic disappointment. You are hard. Madeline, she said. I never thought you were hard, but you are. If protecting my daughter makes me hard, I said, then I am stone. Ruth left. She walked out to her car with the slow, stiff gait of a woman walking on ice. I was alone in the house again, but I had one more conversation to have, the most important one. Tessa came home from volleyball practice at 5. She threw her bag down and went straight to the fridge for a Gatorade. She looked normal, happy, even. She was excited about her party. I watched her, feeling a knot in my throat. I had kept the worst of it from her. I thought I was protecting her, but secrets, even well-intentioned ones, are a kind of betrayal. Tessa, can you come sit down? I asked. She looked at me, sensing the shift in the air. What? Did Grandma cancel again? I sat at the table. No, but we need to talk about why this happened. Really happened. I told her. I told her about the money. I told her about the fake donation numbers. I told her that her simple question in the group chat had threatened to expose a fraud that her aunt and Mrs. Albright were running. I told her that she wasn't bullied because she was unlikable. She was targeted because she was observant. Tessa listened in silence. Her eyes grew wider and wider. So, it wasn't about me? She asked finally. No, I said, it was never about you. You were just the distraction. She stared at the table. A flush of red crept up her cheeks. They used me, she whispered. Aunt Valerie used me? To hide stealing money? Yes, I said. Tessa's hands curled into fists. And Marin knew? Marin was forced. I said quickly, Tessa, Marin is a victim too. Valerie threatened her. She made her choose between lying and losing everything she loved. Tessa shook her head. That is messed up. Mom, that is so messed up. She looked up at me, and I saw a flash of anger that mirrored my own. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Why did you let me think I was crazy for months? I thought I was a bad person. Mom, I thought I must have done something terrible and blocked it out. I am so sorry, I said, reaching for her hand. I didn't know the whole truth until recently. And then, I wanted to fix it before I burdened you with it. I thought I could make it go away without you knowing how ugly it was. You shouldn't have done that, she said, pulling her hand away. I am 16. I am not a baby. If people are using my name, I have a right to know. You are right. I said, I was wrong. I was trying to protect you, but I left you in the dark. I promise. Tessa, no more secrets. From now on, you know what I know. Tessa looked at me. She took a long, shaky breath. Does everyone know? She asked. About the money? The board knows. I said, an investigation is starting. Good, she said. Her voice was hard. I hope they find every penny. She stood up. "I am going to do my homework," she said. "Tessa." "I am fine, Mom," she said, though her voice was thick. I need to process. My whole family is fake. It is a lot to take in on a Friday." She walked out of the room. I let her go. She needed space to mourn the family she thought she had. I sat at the table as the evening darkened into night. The house felt braced for impact. Tomorrow was the Sweet 16. The party was going forward. I had made that promise, but the guest list needed a final purge. I picked up my phone. I opened the group chat, the one with just the adults. I added Valerie and Ruth back in. I typed the message carefully. It needed to be legally clear and emotionally absolute. To the family, Tessa's Sweet 16 will proceed tomorrow as planned. However, given the events of this week, the conditions for attendance have changed. If you wish to attend, you must reply to this text with the following statement. I agree to attend without making accusations, discussing family conflicts, or confronting Tessa or Madeline. If I do not receive this text by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, you will not be admitted. Security will be at the door with a guest list. This is not a negotiation. We are celebrating Tessa. If you cannot do that, stay home. I hit send. The phone sat on the table, a black mirror reflecting the ceiling light. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At 9:30, a reply came through. Dad, I agree to attend without making accusations, discussing family conflicts, or confronting Tessa or Madeline. Love you, sweetie, my dad, the silent observer. He was in. 5 minutes later. Another text. Ruth, I agree to attend without making accusations, discussing family conflicts, or confronting Tessa or Madeline. It was cold. It was copy-pasted, but it was an agreement. Ruth couldn't resist the event. To miss it would be to admit a rift, and Ruth would rather swallow glass than admit a rift in public. I waited for Valerie. The clock ticked past 10, past 11. Midnight came and went. No text from Valerie. I didn't expect one. Valerie was cornered. She was likely meeting with Mrs. Albright, or deleting files, or spiraling. She wouldn't come to bow down. She would come to blow it up, but I was ready. I went to the front door and checked the lock. I checked the windows. I went upstairs and checked on Tessa. She was asleep, her phone on her chest, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. I gently moved it to the nightstand. I went to my own room and lay down next to David. Did they reply? He asked in the dark. Ruth and Dad did. I said, Valerie didn't. She will try something. David said, I know. I said, let her try. David said. He reached out and took my hand. We are ready. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I ran the day's events through my mind like a film reel. The library, the email, the confrontation on the patio. I had broken the cardinal rule of the Henderson family. Thou shalt not expose the cracks. I had taken a sledgehammer to the facade. Tomorrow, in front of friends, neighbors, and the whisper network of Briar Glen, the pieces were going to fall, and I would be there to catch my daughter when they did. I drifted off to sleep with one thought anchoring me. No more secrets. The truth was a dangerous thing, but it was the only thing that could save us now. The venue was breathtaking. A rustic barn converted into a cathedral of fairy lights and reclaimed wood. It was exactly what Tessa had wanted. The high ceilings were draped in soft white fabric, and the tables were set with wildflowers in mason jars. It was innocent. It was beautiful. It was a stage set for a celebration of a girl who deserved to feel cherished. But as I stood by the entrance at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I didn't feel like a party planner. I felt like a sentry. I had hired Big Mike. As the venue manager promised, he was a mountain of a man in a black suit, standing discreetly by the double doors with a clipboard in his hand. He looked like he could stop a tank, which gave me a small measure of comfort. Tessa was inside, surrounded by her friends. She wore a dress of pale lavender chiffon, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked radiant, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Every time the door opened, Her eyes darted toward it, checking for the people who shared her DNA and wished her harm. David stood next to me. He looked handsome in his suit, but his jaw was tight. "Do you think she will come?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "I haven't heard a word since yesterday." Valerie hadn't replied to the ultimatum text. By the rules I had set, she wasn't allowed in. But I knew my sister. Rules were for other people. Valerie operated on the principle of sheer force of will. The family hour began. My dad arrived first, giving Tessa a bear hug that lifted her off the ground. He pressed an envelope into her hand and told her he was proud of her. He adhered to the text agreement perfectly. No drama, just love. Then came the cousins from David's side, loud and happy, oblivious to the war that had been raging in our household. The room began to fill with the low hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware. At 2:30, the doors opened. The room didn't go silent, but the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Ruth and Valerie walked in. They were dressed for a coronation. Ruth wore a silver suit that caught the light, and Valerie was in a dramatic, floor-length emerald gown that was far too formal for an afternoon birthday party. It was a power move. She was here to be looked at. I stepped forward to intercept them. Big Mike looked at me for a signal. I hesitated. If I turned them away now, in front of everyone, it would cause the exact scene I wanted to avoid. Valerie would scream. She would make herself the victim on the doorstep. I gave a curt nod to Mike. Let them in. Valerie swept past me without making eye contact. Her face was a mask of tragic composure. She looked like a widow at a funeral, brave in her suffering. Ruth followed, giving me a tight, pained smile that said, "We are here. Be grateful." They didn't go to Tessa. They went straight to the bar. I watched them. I stayed on the perimeter, moving through the guests, accepting compliments on the centerpieces, but my radar was locked on the woman in the green dress. Tessa saw them. She stiffened, but she didn't approach. She stayed in her circle of friends, her back turned to her aunt. The hour progressed. The appetizers circulated. The tension was a high-frequency wire humming beneath the music. I was near the dessert table when I felt a hand on my arm. "We need to talk." It was Valerie. Up close. The mask had cracks. Her foundation was thick, but it couldn't hide the red rims of her eyes or the tremor in her hands. She smelled of expensive perfume and gin. "Not here, Valerie," I said, pulling my arm away. "Yes, here," she hissed. She stepped into my personal space, blocking my view of the room. "You need to withdraw the request." I picked up a napkin, pretending to busy myself. "I don't know what you are talking about. Don't play dumb with me." "Madeline," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Mrs. Albright called me. Arthur Sterling called me. They are talking about a forensic audit. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you know what that does to a career? It clarifies the truth," I said. "If the money is there, you have nothing to worry about. It is complicated," Valerie snapped. "There are things you don't understand about how nonprofits work. You are going to ruin me over a grudge." I turned to face her fully. "A grudge? You tried to ruin my daughter because she asked a math question. You terrorized your own child to cover your theft. This isn't a grudge. Valerie, this is consequences. Withdraw it," she said. "Send an email right now. Tell Sterling it was a misunderstanding. Tell him you were confused. And if I don't?" Valerie's eyes narrowed. "Then I will tell everyone." "Tell them what?" I challenged. "We have been over this. You have no proof." "I have a voice," she said, "and people listen to me. I will stand on a chair and tell every parent in this room that your daughter is a cyber bully who drove her cousin to suicidal thoughts. I will make a scene so ugly that Tessa will never forget it. I will ruin this day. Madeline, I swear it." I looked at my sister. I saw the hollowness inside her. She was terrified, and terror made her dangerous. "Go ahead," I said softly. Valerie blinked. "What?" "Do it," I said. "Make your scene. But remember one thing. I have the receipts, and I am done protecting you." I walked away. I felt her eyes boring into my back. I walked over to David. my heart hammering against my ribs. She is going to do it. I whispered to him. Let her, David said, his face grim. We are ready. 10 minutes later, the DJ lowered the music. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, if we could have your attention for a moment, we have a special toast from the family. I spun around. Valerie was standing on the small stage area near the DJ booth. She had the microphone. She was smiling, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh God. I heard a guest whisper, Is that the aunt? Valerie tapped the microphone. Hello, everyone, she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. For those who don't know me, I am Valerie, Tessa's aunt, and Marin's mother. She gestured vaguely to the back of the room, where Marin was sitting alone at a table, looking down at her hands. I wasn't sure if I should speak today. Valerie continued, her voice catching with calculated emotion. It has been a difficult year for our family, a year of challenges, a year of painful lessons. The room went quiet. People sensed the shift. This wasn't a birthday toast. It was a sermon. We live in a world where girls are under so much pressure, Valerie said. Pressure to be pretty, pressure to be popular, and sometimes that pressure turns them against each other. Sometimes it makes them do cruel things, things that leave scars. I saw Tessa freeze. She was standing near the cake, her face pale. But I believe in forgiveness, Valerie said, looking directly at Tessa. I believe that even when a girl makes a mistake, a terrible, hurtful mistake that damages her own blood, we must try to forgive. We must try to move past the humiliation and the bullying, and remember that we are family. The silence in the room was suffocating. She hadn't named Tessa, but she had pointed a finger at her as clearly as if she had drawn a target on her forehead. So, Valerie said, raising her glass, I want to propose a toast. To Tessa, may you learn from your past. May you grow into a woman who lifts other women up. Instead of tearing them down, to second chances. She drank. No one else did. The air was toxic. Guests were exchanging horrified glances. Tessa looked like she had been slapped. Tears were welling in her eyes. I didn't run to Tessa. I walked to the stage. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I walked with the steady, heavy gait of an executioner. Valerie saw me coming. She tried to hand the microphone back to the DJ, but I reached out and took it from her hand. I turned to the room. Thank you. Valerie, I said. My voice was amplified, booming through the speakers. It was steady. It was cold. I looked at the crowd. That was a beautiful speech about character. I said, and since we are talking about character and scars and the things people do in the dark, I think it is time we cleared up a few things. Madeline. Stop, Valerie hissed, reaching for the mic. I stepped away from her. For the last 4 months, I said, addressing the room, my sister has been telling many of you that my daughter, Tessa, bullied her cousin. She has told you that Tessa ruined Marin's life. She has told you that there is evidence of this cruelty. I looked at the parents I knew, the ones who had whispered in the grocery store, the ones who had received Valerie's warning messages. I want you to know the truth. I said, I went to the school. There is no record of bullying. I went to the dance studio where Marin supposedly lost her scholarship. They confirmed that Marin was withdrawn by her mother for family reasons, months after the alleged incident. Valerie grabbed my arm. You are lying, she shrieked. She is lying. I shook her off. And regarding the evidence, I continued, my voice rising over hers, there are no messages. There is no chat history. What there is, however, is a financial discrepancy. The room gasped. I saw Arthur Sterling's wife in the back row. Her hand went to her mouth. My daughter was removed from the Briar Glen Youth Outreach Volunteer Group in November. I said, not because she was cruel, but because she asked a question. She asked why the public donation total was $3,000. When the actual money collected was only $1,800, Valerie lunged for me. You shut up. You shut up right now. David stepped forward from the crowd, blocking Valerie. He didn't touch her. He just stood between us, a wall of silent protection. I kept talking. She asked where the missing money went. I said, And to silence her, she was branded a bully, to hide a fraud. A 16-year-old girl was sacrificed by her own family. I looked at Valerie, who was now trembling with rage and fear behind David. An audit request was filed yesterday with the board of directors. I said, "The records will speak for themselves. Tessa did not hurt anyone. She just told the truth." I lowered the microphone. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a facade shattering into a million pieces. Then, Valerie laughed. It was a frantic, broken sound. "She is crazy!" Valerie shouted to the room. "She is jealous. She is making this up to save face because her daughter is a monster. Marin!" She pointed a shaking finger at the back of the room. "Marin, tell them what she did to you. Tell them how she tortured you." Everyone turned to look at Marin. She was sitting at table 9. She was shaking. She looked small and terrified. "Marin, get up," Valerie commanded. "Defend yourself." Marin stood up. She held onto the edge of the table as if the floor was tilting. She looked at her mother. Then she looked at Tessa. Tessa was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Marin took a deep breath. "She didn't do it," Marin said. Her voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried like a bell. "What did you say?" Valerie whispered. "She didn't do it," Marin said louder. "She never bullied me. She never sent those messages." "Marin, sit down," Ruth shouted. She was standing near the buffet, her face purple with mortification. "Sit down. Marin, you are upset." Marin ignored her grandmother. She looked at the crowd. "My mom made it up," Marin said. Her voice shook. "But she didn't stop. She made me say those things. She edited the screenshots. She told me if I didn't go along with it, I would lose my dance scholarship. She said I had to protect the family." She looked at Tessa. "I am sorry, Tessa." Marin sobbed. "I am so sorry. I was so scared." The room erupted. People were gasping, whispering, pulling out their phones. It was chaos. Ruth marched over to Marin. She grabbed her by the shoulder. "That is enough. You are making a scene. You are embarrassing us." I moved. I didn't think. I just moved. I crossed the dance floor in 3 strides and put my hand on Ruth's wrist. "Let her go," I said. Ruth looked at me, shocked. "Madeline, she is hysterical. She is telling the truth." I said, "For the first time in her life, she is telling the truth, and she is allowed to speak." I pushed Ruth's hand away. I stood next to Marin. I put my arm around her. "You are safe," I whispered. Ruth looked around the room. She saw the judgment in the eyes of her friends. She saw the ruin of the reputation she had spent 40 years polishing. She wilted. She turned her back on us and walked out the side door, disappearing into the parking lot. Valerie was left alone on the stage. She looked at the crowd. She looked at me. She looked at her daughter, who was crying in my arms. There was no way back. The lie was dead. Valerie's face twisted. The mask fell away completely, revealing something ugly and raw. "Fine," she spat. "Fine. You want the truth? You want to talk about money?" She pointed at me. "You act so righteous. Madeline, you act so perfect, asking about donation discrepancies, asking where the money went." She looked at David. "Why don't you ask your husband?" she screamed. I froze. David turned slowly to look at her. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Ask him." Valerie laughed. It was a manic, unhinged sound. "Ask him about the $5,000 he borrowed from the outreach fund 2 years ago. Ask him about the loan he needed when his business was under." David's face went gray. "That is a lie," I said immediately. "David's business is fine." "Is it?" Valerie taunted. "Ask him. Madeline, we gave him a check from the operating fund. He swore he would pay it back. But did he? Or is that why the books are so messy? Because we were covering for him?" She looked at me with pure triumph. "You want to audit the books? Go ahead. But you might not like who you find in there." She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. Valerie walked out. She walked through the parted crowd. head high, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. The party didn't stop. Exactly. But it broke. The music started again after a few minutes. An awkward, tentative song, but the air was sucked out of the room. People were whispering. Some were leaving. I stood there, Marin still crying against my shoulder. I looked at David. He was standing where he had been, near the stage. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor. "David?" I said. He looked up. His eyes were full of a panic I had never seen before. "It wasn't like that," he said. "The world stopped spinning. It wasn't she is lying. It wasn't like that." I felt a coldness spread through my veins. Colder than the fear of the last 4 months. "We will talk later," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. I turned to Tessa. She was standing with her friends. They were hugging her. They had heard Marin. They knew she was innocent. That part was over. The cloud over my daughter had lifted, but a new storm had just rolled in. The rest of the night was a blur. We cut the cake. Tessa blew out the candles. She smiled, and it was a real smile, because she had her name back. Marin stayed close to me, terrified to go home, and I arranged for her to stay with my dad for the night. But as I watched my daughter dance, free and light, I felt a heavy weight settling on my chest. I had won. I had exposed the lie. I had saved my daughter. But as I looked across the room at my husband, who was nursing a drink in the corner and avoiding my gaze, I realized that the truth is not a surgical tool. It is a bomb. You can't control the blast radius. Valerie was gone. Ruth was gone. The reputation of the Henderson family was ash. And the man I trusted most in the world was suddenly a stranger. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark parking lot. Revenge is a story we tell ourselves to feel powerful. We think it ends with the villain vanquished and the hero standing tall. But in the real world, in Briar Glen, revenge is just a demolition. The house was clean, the walls were down, and I was standing in the wreckage, wondering what, if anything, I could build from what was left. Thank you so much for listening to Your Daughter Doesn't Deserve a Sweet 16. I hope this story kept you on the edge of your seat. It's a heavy reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones wearing the best masks. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below letting me know where you are listening from and what you would have done in Madeline's shoes. Would you have exposed the family or kept the secret? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more realistic, emotional family dramas. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what secrets are hiding in plain sight.